In 1998, Sony had, well, billions of dollars in the bank.
Oh, yeah. Massive cash reserves.
Right. And they had the world's absolute best audio engineers on their payroll and just a total undisputed monopoly on the portable music market.
They owned it completely.
They really did. But then, 3 years later, that multi-billion-dollar empire was rendered completely obsolete by this tiny plastic box that held a maximum of, 12 songs?
Yep, 12 songs if you were lucky.
And it sounded terribly muffled. So if you are looking at your own industry right now, watching these massive legacy giants fall and wondering how in the world a tiny, underfunded startup managed to topple them, you are definitely not alone.
A very common feeling, yeah.
It can feel like the ground is just shifting randomly beneath our feet. But today we are going to decode exactly how giant companies essentially commit corporate suicide.
Which is a heavy way to put it, but it's accurate.
Right. We are looking under the hood of how entire industries get reshaped, undercut, and completely redefined. Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to map the absolute anatomy of market disruption.
And that financial dominance you mentioned with Sony, it's ironically what sealed their fate.
Wait, really? Their dominance killed them?
Exactly. It is a phenomenon that absolutely terrifies corporate boardrooms, but for anyone who understands the underlying mechanics, it creates massive opportunities. Established market leaders rarely fail because they forget how to build good products.
Okay.
They fail because the very structures that made them successful become the exact anchors that, drag them right to the bottom.
Wow. Okay, so to map out these mechanics, we have this incredible stack of source material on the table today. The foundation is this super comprehensive 120-minute masterclass document.
It's incredibly dense.
It is. It was generated by the StartupLanes ecosystem. And for some context for you listening, StartupLanes was founded by Dr. Shishir Gupta, and it operates across 56 cities globally.
Which gives them a massive footprint.
Huge. They've incubated hundreds of startups, giving them this very raw frontline view of this whole battlefield. So the masterclass synthesizes Clayton Christensen's foundational theory of disruption.
Right, the classic academic framework.
Exactly. And it breaks down 10 specific global startup case studies and then brings everything into the modern era with these cutting-edge venture capital frameworks that we've pulled from, like Reddit, Quora, and EquityZen.
Which provides a really necessary bridge, I think. It takes the academic theory, which, well, it can sometimes feel a bit abstract.
Oh, for sure.
And it slams it into the on-the-ground realities of modern venture capital and global market dynamics.
So we really need to start by tearing down a major misconception here, because the word disruption is just thrown around so casually right now.
It's become a total buzzword.
Right. A company launches a slightly faster food delivery app, and suddenly they're disrupting the market. But based on this masterclass, true disruption is a very specific, almost surgical economic maneuver.
It's highly calculated.
Right. It is rarely just about building a faster or a cheaper product.
What's fascinating here is that the material makes it incredibly clear that true disruption is almost never a technological accident.
Okay.
It is the predictable, mathematical outcome of an incumbent's own financial success. We always assume giants fall because a scrappy startup out-innovates them or starves them of engineering talent.
Right, the whole two guys in a garage myth.
Exactly. But the reality is that the corporate giant is trapped by their own cost structures. And even more importantly, by the relentless demands of their shareholders. They become completely paralyzed by the need to protect their high-margin legacy businesses, and that leaves the bottom of the market completely unguarded.
Let's bring this to life by returning to that Sony story, because it perfectly illustrates what happens when an incumbent does absolutely everything right and still loses everything.
It's the perfect case study.
So, late 1990s. The Sony Discman was the undisputed king of portable music. They were, listening to their customers. They were engineering these crazy anti-skip lasers, adding bass boost switches, building this super premium CD hardware.
Because audiophiles were asking for pristine, studio-quality sound on a portable disc.
And Sony delivered. They gave the people what they wanted. But then, in 1998, this small company called Diamond Multimedia launches the Rio PMP 300.
The very first commercially available MP3 player.
Yeah. And if you looked at it through the lens of traditional audio metrics, it was a wildly inferior product.
Oh, it was terrible by those standards.
It was this weird, tiny piece of plastic. It only held about 8 to 12 songs total. Because the audio files had to be highly compressed to fit on the early flash memory, the music sounded noticeably muffled compared to a CD.
And just to get the music onto the device?
Oh my gosh, the cables?
Yeah, you had to use these complex, agonizingly slow parallel port computer cables. It took forever.
Right. So Sony executives looked at this tiny device and they just laughed. They asked a perfectly logical question. Why on earth would any serious music fan trade their pristine, studio-quality CDs for 8 low-quality tracks that took an hour to download?
But that logical question,
Yeah.
that was the exact trap.
How so?
Well, Sony was evaluating the Rio MP3 player using the established metrics of the compact disc market, specifically audio fidelity and the physical album format.
Right, they were measuring it against a CD.
Exactly. But the Rio possessed a hidden architectural advantage that fundamentally changed the physics of the user experience. Because the Rio used digital flash memory, it had 0 mechanical moving parts.
Which meant 0 skipping.
0. No matter how hard you were running, jumping, or moving, the music never skipped. That was physically impossible for a spinning compact disc to achieve.
Even with those expensive anti-skip lasers.
Right, no matter how good Sony's lasers were. Furthermore, because the Rio didn't have to accommodate the physical, 4.7-inch diameter of a compact disc, the hardware could scale down to fit comfortably inside a jeans pocket.
Ah, the form factor.
Yep. And by 2001, Apple recognized this exact underlying architecture, and they leveraged it to build the iPod.
Right, 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Exactly. They paired that pocket scale size with a massive hard drive, suddenly giving consumers 1,000 songs. And in the staggering blink of an eye, the Discman and Sony's entire portable dominance was just obsolete.
It makes me think of an analogy. Like, imagine a world-class 5-star steakhouse. They have the best chefs, crystal glasses, incredible ambiance.
Okay, I follow.
And on a guy sets up a tiny, cheap pizza stand right on the sidewalk outside. The 5-star restaurant manager looks at the pizza stand and laughs. The pizza is greasy, it's served on a paper plate, and there's literally nowhere to sit.
The manager is not intimidated at all.
Right. The manager says, our customers demand crystal and filet mignon. We would never sell a $2 slice of pizza. It would destroy our prestigious brand. But they completely ignore the fact that the pizza stand is suddenly capturing 90% of the neighborhood's daily foot traffic because people just want a fast, cheap lunch.
That captures the structural blindness perfectly. I mean, Sony was experiencing what Clayton Christensen defined as the innovator's dilemma.
The innovator's dilemma.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't that Sony's executives were stupid, They were structurally trapped by their own success.
Because they had so much invested in the old way.
Exactly. Sony had spent billions of dollars over decades building these massive physical CD manufacturing plants. They had deep, super lucrative distribution deals for physical albums. They employed thousands of engineers dedicated just to complex laser mechanisms.
Right. Their whole ecosystem was built around the physical disc.
So if Sony had recognized the MP3 threat and pivoted immediately to pure digital downloads, they would have had to actively cannibalize and destroy their own multi-billion-dollar physical CD revenue stream.
Which their board would never allow.
Never. Their financial structure, physically and economically, prevented them from following the startup into the new digital space.
Wow. So if you're listening to this and wondering how this applies to you, whether you are launching a startup, maybe evaluating a market for your investment portfolio, or just trying to navigate your own career, this is the exact dynamic you have to hunt for.
Absolutely.
You are looking for the structural trap. You have to identify where the giant in your industry is, physically, legally, or financially unable to follow a smaller, scrappier competitor, because doing so would ruin their current quarterly earnings.
And understanding how incumbents fall requires understanding how startups strategically pick those entry points. Christensen's foundational taxonomy of innovation breaks market shifts down into very distinct categories.
Basically contrasting the defensive moves of the giant against the offensive strikes of the disruptor.
Exactly.
So the sources outline 3 main categories. First, we have what the massive incumbents are incredibly good at, which is sustaining innovation.
Right.
This is when an established company makes their existing product like 10% better for their highest paying clients. Gillette adding a 5th blade to a razor, or a car manufacturer putting a slightly faster processor in the dashboard screen. It is purely iterative.
And sustaining innovation is highly profitable. I mean, it allows the leader to charge a premium to their most demanding customers, but it doesn't disrupt anything.
It just maintains the status quo.
It merely cements it, yeah. The existential danger to the incumbent comes from the actual disruptive maneuvers, the first of which is low-end disruption.
Okay, let's get into that.
This occurs when a challenger specifically targets overserved, highly price-sensitive customers at the very bottom of the market. These are the consumers who look at that vibrating 5-blade razor and say, I don't need a facial massage, I just want a basic shave for $1.
Right. And the incumbent's reaction is almost universally dismissive. They're like, go ahead, take those cheap customers. Our profit margins on them were terrible anyway.
Exactly. The giant happily retreats upward to focus entirely on their premium, high-margin products.
They abandon the low end, completely unaware that the startup is going to use that low-end revenue to fund their gradual climb up market.
Precisely. And the other offensive maneuver is new market disruption.
Okay, how is that different?
This is when a challenger creates a totally new value proposition for complete non-consumers. People who previously lacked the money, the technical skill, or even just the access to participate in the market.
The sources mention Square here, right?
Yes, Square is a perfect example. 10 years ago, legacy credit card processors would not underwrite a merchant account for a food truck or a teenager selling crafts at a farmer's market.
It was just too much hassle for them.
Exactly. The paperwork, the background checks, the hardware leases, it was way too complex and expensive for such low transaction volumes.
So they just ignored them.
Right. And Square arrived, handed those non-consumers a tiny plastic dongle that plugged right into a headphone jack, and magically conjured a massive new market out of thin air.
Which brings us to one of the most vital concepts in the StartupLanes notes, and that's the incumbent margin trap. I want to quote Dr. Shishir Gupta directly from the text here because it perfectly crystallizes this dynamic.
It's a great quote.
He states, the most dangerous sentence in corporate strategy is, that market is too low margin for us.
It really is the ultimate corporate blind spot. Consider the mechanics of a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
Let's say this incumbent operates with 70% gross margin.
Okay, 70%.
Wall Street analysts expect and honestly demand those 70% margins every single quarter. If they drop to even 68%, the stock price tanks.
Right. Investors freak out.
So now a startup enters the absolute bottom of the market with a scrappy, automated product that only generates a 20% margin. The CEO of the massive public company mathematically cannot chase that startup.
Because it would ruin their average.
Exactly. If the CEO decides to launch a competing 20% margin product to fight the startup, their blended corporate margins drop, Wall Street panics, and the board of directors fires the CEO. The executive is economically incentivized to ignore the disruptor.
Wait, let me push back on that logic for a second. Because every company's stated goal is to build a better, more premium product for their best customers. Are you saying that by successfully making a premium product, a legacy company is actually making themselves more vulnerable to being killed?
Yes, absolutely. Because it changes the definition of quality.
How so?
Well, by continuously adding expensive features to satisfy that top tier of demanding, high-paying clients, the incumbent inevitably ends up overserving the vast majority of the market.
So they give people more than they actually need?
Right. They force the average everyday buyer to pay a premium for a bloated product packed with complex features they will never actually use. This overserving creates a massive gaping vulnerability at the bottom of the market.
And that's where the startup comes in.
Yes. The startup sneaks into that vacuum, offering a cheap, simple, good enough alternative. And the incumbent is too top-heavy and margin-obsessed to fight back.
Okay, so if the incumbent is trapped by their need for high margins, how exactly do the startups achieve these radically low-cost structures in the first place? I mean, it can't just be about paying their employees less money.
No, not at all. According to the masterclass, the answer is rooted in the actual physics of technology and efficiency.
Right. The material outlines the specific conceptual formula for technological disruption. Let me read this. It defines disruption as zero marginal cost multiplied by exponential speed, all divided by legacy capital expenditure plus human friction.
It's a brilliant way to frame it.
Let's break that down, starting with the bottom of the equation. Legacy capital expenditure, or CapEx. When we talk about CapEx in this context, we are really talking about the heavy physical anchors around a legacy company's neck.
Precisely. It is the real estate, the physical factories, the manual supply chains. The shift from physical infrastructure to digital infrastructure is the great efficiency catalyst.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Look at the history of illumination. The incandescent light bulb was wildly inefficient. It wasted up to 95% of its electrical energy generating pure heat rather than light.
Just burning energy.
Right. But when LED technology emerged, utilizing solid-state semiconductor materials, it converted electrons directly into photons, bypassing the heat waste entirely. It fundamentally altered the physics and the economics of lighting.
And we really have to pause and look at Blockbuster and Netflix through this lens, too. Because in the year 2000, Netflix's founders walked into Blockbuster's headquarters and offered to sell their entire operation for $50 million.
Which is just, it's mind-blowing in hindsight.
Blockbuster literally laughed them out of the room. The hubris is staggering now, but at the time, Blockbuster thought they were invincible. Their entire empire was built on heavy physical assets.
Massive capex.
Exactly. Thousands of retail storefronts, huge inventories of physical plastic VHS tapes and DVDs, and this incredibly toxic revenue model that actually punished their customers by charging exorbitant late fees.
But to Blockbuster's board, their spreadsheets looks flawless. Netflix, though, they started with a flat-rate DVD-by-mail model that entirely eliminated the late fee friction.
Right, they solved the customer pain point first.
Exactly. And then they executed the ultimate efficiency pivot to pure digital streaming. Blockbuster was carrying the crushing weight of commercial real estate leases and physical inventory. Netflix was just sending packets of data over fiber optic cables.
It's a recurring nightmare for legacy companies. Like, Kodak actually invented the digital camera in 1975.
Their own engineers built it.
Yes, but the executives shelved the technology to protect their highly profitable physical film chemical processing business. They chose to protect heavy chemistry while the rest of the world moved to weightless digital sensors.
It's the innovator's dilemma all over again.
We watched massive, heavy CRT televisions disrupted by ultra-thin OLEDs. We watched mechanical typewriters, where a single typo required physical whiteout and carbon copies, get replaced by cloud-based word processors, where editing, deleting, and duplicating costs absolutely nothing.
Even physical paper maps and expensive standalone GPS units, like those old Garmins you'd mount on your dashboard.
Oh, man, I remember those.
They got completely wiped out by Waze and Google Maps, leveraging the existing smartphone that was already in your pocket. The critical mechanism of this efficiency catalyst is that it doesn't just make the operation cheaper for the company to run.
Okay, what else does it do?
It completely expands the market to the non-consumers. When a process becomes frictionless and cost-effective, populations of people who previously couldn't afford or, just couldn't be bothered to use the service suddenly flock to it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us back to the top of that disruption equation we mentioned. Zero marginal cost.
Yes.
This is the difference between linear scaling and exponential scaling. Like, if a traditional taxi company wants to double its revenue, it has to physically buy twice as many cars and hire twice as many drivers.
Which takes time and a lot of money.
Right. That is a linear, capital-heavy grind. But when a software startup writes a piece of code, developing it might be expensive up front, but serving the second user, or the 2 millionth user, costs practically zero additional dollars.
That zero marginal cost is the ultimate weapon against a company trapped by physical assets.
The theory is incredibly robust, but the StartupLanes Masterclass grounds this in 10 very specific modern global case studies. These companies didn't just stumble into success, they actively weaponized these exact structural vulnerabilities against the incumbents.
Right. They were the playbook.
So let's explore how these mechanics actually played out, starting with the vulnerability of massive physical real estate. The defining example here is Airbnb in the United States.
Classic.
For over a century, the global hotel industry was dominated by massive, asset-heavy chains like Hilton and Marriott. Their entire business model was brutally heavy. You have to buy prime urban real estate, secure massive, high-interest construction loans, spend years building a concrete tower, and then staff it with hundreds of employees just to keep the lights on.
And then Airbnb arrives. They enter as a textbook low-end and new market disruptor. They did not pour a single ounce of concrete.
Not one.
They didn't build a single hotel. Instead, they built an asset-light, peer-to-peer digital marketplace that connected homeowners directly with budget-conscious travelers.
And the hotel incumbents completely dismissed them. The executives looked at Airbnb and assumed it was just this fringe platform for broke college students willing to sleep on a stranger's air mattress.
Right. They didn't see it as real competition.
They assumed the lack of standardized room service and a front desk meant it would never threaten their core corporate travel business.
But they misjudged the threat because they were looking at it through the lens of traditional hospitality metrics.
Just like Sony with the CDs.
Exactly. The reality was that hotel balance sheets physically could not compete with Airbnb's zero marginal cost inventory model. If Airbnb wanted to add 10,000 available rooms in Paris ahead of a major event, they just needed 10,000 Parisians to upload a few photos to a website.
Wow.
The cost to Airbnb was virtually zero. If a legacy hotel chain wanted to add 10,000 rooms in Paris, it would require a decade of zoning approvals and billions of dollars in capital expenditure. The incumbent was fighting a war of attrition against an enemy with no physical supply chain to attack.
We see that exact same asset-light playbook deployed by Gojek in Indonesia, too.
Oh, Gojek is a fascinating case.
Jakarta is famous for its immense paralyzing traffic congestion. The legacy transit infrastructure was a mix of traditional capital-heavy taxi fleets and this massive informal network of motorcycle taxis, which are known locally as ojeks.
Right.
Gojek didn't try to buy thousands of cars to compete with the taxi fleets. They built a real-time dispatch application that organized the existing chaotic informal market.
They structure the unstructured supply.
Exactly. By standardizing the pricing and adding trust to the transaction, they built a massive user base without owning the vehicles, eventually expanding that network into a multi-service super app.
Because another massive vulnerability incumbents face isn't just physical assets, but process friction. Legacy industries are often bogged down by heavy manual paperwork and compliance overhead.
Yeah.
Look at the retail banking sector in Europe before N26 launched in Germany.
Oh man, banking was ancient. You had to physically walk into a massive brick-and-mortar branch during very specific, inconvenient hours. You had to fill out stacks of physical paperwork, wait days for approval, and then you were charged huge monthly account maintenance fees just so the bank could pay the lease on that physical branch.
N26 recognized that those maintenance fees were a structural trap for the legacy banks. N26 launched as a completely mobile-first, cloud-native digital bank. They bypassed the physical branch entirely.
Just entirely skipped it.
Right. But the crucial mechanism wasn't just having an app, it was how they handled regulatory compliance. They utilized modern API integrations for instant, paperless identity verification. You could open a fully regulated bank account from your phone in under 8 minutes.
That's unheard of for legacy banks.
And because they didn't have thousands of physical branches to heat, cool, and staff, their customer acquisition cost was a fraction of the legacy banks. They passed those savings on by offering zero-fee accounts, and the legacy banks couldn't respond without destroying the very revenue streams that kept their physical branches open.
We see a very similar unbundling of friction with Fiverr in Israel, targeting the recruitment and freelance industry. Finding freelance talent used to be a heavy process. You had to go through expensive staffing agencies, negotiate complex hourly contracts, and deal with massive recruitment overhead.
It was exhausting.
Fiverr looked at that and simply productized the work. They unbundled complex freelance projects into simple, standardized $5 microtasks or gigs.
And the traditional staffing agencies scoffed at $5 tasks. Just like the high-end razor company, they refused to deal in low-margin work because the administrative friction of processing a $5 contract would cost them more than they made.
The margin trap strikes again.
Exactly. But Fiverr built a trusted digital marketplace that automated the transaction friction. They captured an astronomical volume of small tasks, and as their platform and reputation systems matured, they steadily moved upmarket.
Riding the escalator up?
Yep, eventually facilitating complex, high-dollar enterprise workflows, completely bypassing the legacy agencies.
We touched on Square earlier, but their mechanism perfectly illustrates this friction removal. Legacy merchant acquirers ignored micro merchants because a food truck simply didn't generate enough credit card volume to justify the heavy manual underwriting process and the cost of leasing a bulky point-of-sale terminal.
So Jack Dorsey and the Square team just bypassed the manual underwriting entirely. They used automated algorithms to batch the risk across millions of micro merchants and gave them a piece of plastic that turned their existing smartphone into the terminal.
When we transition to structural and marginal economics, the scale of disruption becomes truly staggering. Like, the case study of Reliance Jio in India is an absolute masterclass in exploiting legacy technical debt.
Oh, the Jio story is incredible.
Before 2016, the mobile telecom market in India was dominated by an oligopoly of incumbent operators. They were charging relatively high fees for 2G and 3G voice and data services, which meant hundreds of millions of lower-income citizens were effectively priced out of the digital economy.
And the incumbents were trapped. They were carrying massive financial debt from old government spectrum auctions, and they were bleeding cash maintaining dual legacy networks, their old 2G infrastructure for voice and their 3G infrastructure for data.
So what did Reliance Jio do?
Well, Reliance Jio, led by Mukesh Ambani, recognized this structural paralysis. Jio decided to bypass the legacy architecture entirely. They poured massive capital into building a greenfield, pure IP LTE 4G network from scratch.
Let's clarify what a pure IP packet switch network actually means in practice, because this is the technological wedge they use.
Sure. In legacy 2G and 3G systems, when you made a phone call, the network had to keep a dedicated, continuous circuit open for the entire duration of that call.
Which sounds expensive.
It was highly inefficient and costly to maintain.
Yeah.
Jio built a packet switched network, meaning they treated a voice call exactly the same way they treated an email or WhatsApp message.
Oh, okay.
The voice was just broken down into tiny packets of digital data and routed over the internet protocol. Because voice became just another lightweight data packet, the marginal cost to Jio for a user making a phone call dropped to near absolute zero.
Which allowed Jio to drop an absolute nuclear bomb on the market. They offered high-definition voice calls for entirely free, forever. And they undercut the legacy data prices by over 90%. The incumbents literally could not match the offer of free voice calls without instantly bankrupting their own companies, because their legacy networks required them to charge for voice just to pay off their debt.
They were stuck.
Jio utilized massive digital onboarding to acquire 100 million users in just 170 days.
100 million. In 170 days. That's unprecedented.
It was a complete structural massacre of the legacy telecom cartels.
We witnessed a very similar economic assault in the United States financial sector with Robinhood, too. For decades, retail stock brokerages like Charles Schwab and Fidelity relied on a very straightforward, high-margin revenue model.
Right.
They charged fixed commissions, often around $6.95, every single time you bought or sold a stock.
And then Robinhood launches this slick, mobile-first app targeting young, first-time investors, and their core value proposition was zero commission trades. But if they aren't charging me that almost $7 fee, how are they keeping the lights on? How is that a sustainable business?
That is the invisible machinery of their disruption. Robinhood monetized through a mechanism called payment for order flow, or PFO.
Okay, PFOF.
Instead of charging the retail user a fee, Robinhood bundles up millions of retail buy and sell orders and routes them to massive institutional market makers. Those market makers execute the trades and pay Robinhood a tiny fraction of a cent per share for the right to handle that massive volume of order flow. By shifting the monetization away from the user and onto the back end of market makers, Robinhood effectively turned the user's order flow into the product.
They captured millions of young investors who were previously priced out by the legacy commissions. And they squeezed the incumbents so hard that giants like Schwab and Fidelity were ultimately forced to drop their own fees to zero just to stop the bleeding, which completely destroyed their legacy revenue model and triggered a massive wave of industry consolidation.
Now, let's look at a case that challenges the pure software narrative, which is BYD in China. BYD started in the 1990s as a manufacturer of rechargeable batteries for cell phones.
Okay.
Over 2 decades, they systematically vertically integrated the entire electric vehicle supply chain. They built their own semiconductor foundries, their own electric motor manufacturing, and crucially, their own proprietary battery technology, the Blade battery.
Hold on, I need to stop you there. Because everything we've discussed so far, Airbnb, Gojek, M26, Robinhood, has been about asset-light software disrupting heavy physical industries.
Yeah.
Building your own massive lithium battery factories and semiconductor plants sounds incredibly capital-intensive. Isn't that the exact opposite of the disruptive startup model we just praised?
It's a great observation. It is a brilliant pivot in the narrative. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights a crucial nuance in the masterclass. Disruption is not solely the domain of asset-light software.
Okay.
BYD utilized what we define as a cost-advantage structural moat. The most expensive, complex component of an electric vehicle is the battery pack.
Right.
Because BYD started as a battery company and vertically integrated that specific manufacturing process, they achieved a level of unit cost efficiency and automation that legacy combustion engine automakers simply couldn't physically replicate.
They had a massive head start on the hardest part.
Exactly. The legacy foreign automakers were trapped. They were prioritizing their high-margin gasoline vehicles and delayed investing heavily in battery foundries. BYD used their massive vertically integrated manufacturing scale to undercut the legacy players on price while remaining highly profitable. It is a physical, heavy asset asymmetry, but it is just as devastatingly disruptive.
That reframes it perfectly. It's about having a structural advantage the other guy can't easily copy, whether that's a frictionless software app or a fully owned, highly optimized factory.
Let's shift to how consumer behaviors are changing. Look at Pinduoduo in China.
The Chinese e-commerce landscape seemed impenetrable. It was dominated by colossal titans like Alibaba and JD.com.
Huge players.
But those giants were locked in a fierce battle for Tier 1 and Tier 2 urban consumers, wealthy buyers searching for premium branded goods with lightning-fast shipping. Pinduoduo looked at that bloodbath and completely walked away from it. They targeted the massively underserved Tier 3 and Tier 4 lower-income cities and rural areas. And they used a totally different mechanism. A gamified consumer-to-manufacturer, or C2M, group buying model.
Integrated right into WeChat.
Yes, they integrated directly into WeChat. If you wanted a box of apples or a basic t-shirt, you would get a massive discount if you could convince 5 of your friends on WeChat to buy the item with you directly from the factory, bypassing all the middleman distributors.
And the incumbents saw this and ignored it. They viewed Pinduoduo's catalog as cheap, unbranded, low-margin agricultural goods that didn't fit their premium brand image.
Sound familiar?
Exactly. By the time Alibaba and JD realized the threat, Pinduoduo had leveraged those social network effects to capture hundreds of millions of active buyers in the lower tiers, establishing an insurmountable foothold.
The final case study hits on a vulnerability we all feel, which is planned obsolescence. Consumer electronics giants, the massive smartphone and laptop manufacturers, rely on a cycle of planned obsolescence. Their stock price depends on you feeling compelled to buy a brand new $1,000 device every 2 or 3 years.
It's exhausting for the consumer.
It is. Backmarket, based in France, looked at this and recognized the massive waste and consumer fatigue. They don't try to build a new phone. They built a trusted, standardized marketplace exclusively for refurbished tech.
The original equipment manufacturers had historically refused to legitimize the refurbished market because they feared, quite rightly, that it would cannibalize their new hardware sales.
Of course.
They left the used market to sketchy peer-to-peer classified ads. Backmarket stepped into that void. They built rigorous, standardized quality control algorithms, demanded strict warranties from their third-party refurbishers, and presented a consumer experience that felt as safe as buying new.
Consumers flock to them. Why pay $1,000 for a phone when you can get the exact same utility with a guarantee for 50% off? Backmarket grew so large that they essentially forced the major global brands to acknowledge the circular economy and start offering their own certified refurbished programs just to defend their market share.
When you synthesize these 10 cases, a clear pattern emerges. Disruption is not monolithic, it is a targeted strike. It adapts to the specific, localized vulnerabilities of the incumbent, whether that weakness is a reliance on heavy real estate, an addiction to transaction fees, massive technical debt, or a reliance on planned obsolescence.
Which brings us to the most actionable part of this entire deep dive. If you are a venture capitalist, a startup founder, or an executive in 2026, you aren't just guessing where the next strike will land. You are auditing the market. The StartupLanes Masterclass provides the exact diagnostic tool the experts use, the Disruption Vulnerability Index, or the DVI. If you are listening to this and wondering if your own company or a company you invest in is in danger, there are 3 specific diagnostic tests you can run right now.
The first pillar of the DVI is margin asymmetry. You literally look at the incumbent's balance sheet. Are they structurally reliant on gross margins above 60 or 70%?
The margin trap.
Exactly. If their entire corporate apparatus is built to consume high margins, they are incredibly vulnerable to a low-cost entrant because, as we discussed, they cannot engage in a price war without destroying their stock valuation.
The second pillar is the overserved layer. Look at the product. Are everyday buyers being forced to pay for bloated, overly complex features when all they really want is baseline utility?
Right, the 5-blade razor.
Yes. If every customer is forced to pay for the 5-blade vibrating razor with a heating element, but 70% of them just want a sharp single blade, that is a red flashing light indicating a massive opportunity for a low-end disruptor.
And the third pillar is asset rigidity. Are the incumbents locked into heavy fixed assets? Do they own massive physical retail footprints, legacy mainframe computer systems, or outdated physical supply chains that prevent them from adapting quickly to software-led agile models?
If an industry scores high on all three of those high margins, overserved customers, and heavy rigid assets, it is an absolute sitting duck. But this is where the material pulls from recent Reddit, Quora, and equities and venture capital discussions to reveal a massive shift in the 2026 playbook.
This is huge.
For the last 20 years, the prevailing mantra in Silicon Valley was software is eating the world. The playbook was simple: build a slick software application, remain asset light, and you win. But the modern VC consensus is that the era of pure software moats is rapidly dying.
It is a profound paradigm-shifting realization. With the absolute explosion of generative AI capability, the cost of generating software code has plummeted to near zero.
Anyone can code now.
Right. A small team, or even a solo developer, can use AI to clone an established app's user interface and core functionality over a single weekend. If your company's only competitive advantage is a clever software wrapper and a nice design, you have zero real economic defensibility.
So the smart money, the really heavy venture capital, is aggressively pivoting to a strategy they call HALO. That's heavy assets, low obsolescence. True, enduring defensibility today requires marrying brilliant digital intelligence with massive physical scale.
We are talking about startups investing in custom silicon fabrication, owning local energy grids, or deploying massive fleets of physical robotics. It's a total reversal from the asset-light era of Airbnb.
It is the brutal realization that to survive in a world where software is instantly commoditized by AI, you must anchor your business in the physical realm.
Exactly. A $2 million funded software startup can still terrify a $10 billion enterprise by exploiting a margin vulnerability. But to stay alive, to prevent being immediately cloned by 10 other AI startups, that disruptor eventually has to build something tangible and heavy.
I really think of it this way. Software has just become a commodity. It is exactly like having a recipe. Thanks to AI, anyone can get the recipe now. They can generate the code in seconds. The ALO strategy is about owning the only massive industrial kitchen in town.
Oh, that's the perfect way to put it.
You can have my recipe, you can memorize it, but without the $50,000 commercial ovens, the automated supply chain, and the health department permits, you physically cannot bake the bread at scale.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The recipe is worthless without the infrastructure to execute it. And that leads us directly into the final critical phase of the masterclass: surviving the counterattack.
That's right.
Let's say you've used the DVI, you found a vulnerability, you launched a disruptive product at a much lower price point, and you were capturing market share. What happens when the giant finally wakes up and decides to take the margin hit to crush you? Or worse, what happens when 10 other AI startups clone your recipe?
You need a moat. During the Q&A section of the masterclass, there's a fantastic exchange. A founder named Elena Rostova, tuning in from Tallinn, Estonia, asks a highly critical question. She asks Dr. Gupta how to balance low-end disruptive pricing with the eventual need for profitability.
It's the million-dollar question.
And Dr. Gupta's answer is a severe warning to anyone building a business. He says low pricing is an entry strategy, not a business model.
It is a mistake we see constantly. Too many startups believe that simply subsidizing their product with massive amounts of venture capital to offer artificially low prices is true disruption. It is not. It is just a pricing stunt.
You run out of money eventually.
Exactly. You must have underlying structural advantages that allow you to actually be profitable at that low price. And to protect those margins over time, you have to establish one of the 4 economic moats.
Let's lay down these 4 pillars of strategic economic moats, because this is the ultimate defense mechanism. We've touched on some of these, but let's formalize them. Number 1, network effects.
Network effects occur when the fundamental value of a product or service increases for every existing user, with each new user that joins. Airbnb is the classic example. Every new host that lists an apartment makes the platform more valuable for guests, and every new guest makes it more lucrative for hosts.
It creates a self-reinforcing flywheel.
Right. If a competitor clones Airbnb software tomorrow, it doesn't matter, because they don't have the two-sided network of millions of users.
Number 2, switching costs. This is all about creating intense operational friction if a customer tries to leave your platform. If you sell enterprise software and you embed your tool deep into a company's data pipelines, their HR systems, and their daily workflows,
tearing your software out and retraining their entire staff becomes a massive, expensive operational headache.
The customer stays because leaving is just too painful.
Number 3, cost advantages. We explored this deeply with BYD's battery manufacturing. If you achieve massive economies of scale, Or you develop proprietary automated manufacturing that literally lowers your unit costs below what anyone else can physically achieve, you win. You can survive a price war that would bankrupt your competitors.
And number 4, intangible assets. These are the things you can't easily put a price tag on, but are impossible to clone. Regulatory licenses, patents, or a deep, generationally established brand equity that creates trust and emotional lock-in with the consumer.
This brings up another pivotal question from the Masterclass Q&A. Marcus Vance, a participant from Austin, Texas, asked a question that strikes at the heart of modern strategy. He essentially asked, in this generative AI era where features and user interfaces are cloned overnight, how do you actually build defensibility if you don't have the billions of dollars required for a physical ALO strategy?
It's a great question. And the answer they provide is absolutely crucial for anyone building software today. Defensibility in the software space has shifted almost entirely to proprietary workflow data loops. As we noted, AI can clone a user interface in a weekend, but it cannot easily clone a company's embedded team habits, their deep historical data integrations, or the specific proprietary workflows they've built up over years of usage. You have to build systems of record, not just standalone tools.
Exactly. If your software just performs a single isolated task, it will be replaced by a free AI plugin. But if your software becomes the central nervous system where a company's historical data lives and where their employees naturally collaborate, you become structurally indispensable.
So, bringing all of this together, what does this mean for you as you navigate your industry? Whether you are prepping for a corporate strategy meeting tomorrow morning, leading a small engineering team, or even just analyzing a stock for your personal retirement portfolio, you have to look past the marketing and look to the moats.
You have to look for structural defensibility.
Right. If the company has a cool, flashy feature but absolutely no structural moat, if they don't have network effects, high switching costs, or proprietary data loops, they are a sitting duck in the AI era. They will be cloned and they will be crushed. You have to evaluate companies not by what their shiny product does today, but by how painfully difficult it would be for a customer to abandon them tomorrow.
It fundamentally changes how you view the life cycle of market leadership. Disruption, as Dr. Gupta so elegantly frames it, you're like riding an upmarket escalator. You board the escalator at the very bottom, in the basement of the market, serving the customers that no one else cares about.
And the giants ignore you?
The massive incumbents ignore you because the margins in the basement are terrible. But as your technology improves and your efficiency scales, you ride that escalator up. By the time you reach the penthouse, serving the premium clients, you haven't just arrived to the top, you've rewritten the entire unit cost model of the industry, and the old giants have nowhere left to go.
It is a phenomenal, ruthless way to view business history. From the Sony Discman ignoring the MP3, to Blockbuster laughing at Netflix, to legacy banks getting outmaneuvered by cloud-native apps, it is the exact same escalator every single time. To wrap up our synthesis of this massive StartupLanes document, I want to reiterate a quote from Dr. Gupta that really stuck with me.
Let's hear it.
He said, "If you want something new, you have to stop doing something old." Understanding these corporate blind spots isn't just an academic exercise. It gives you the blueprint to either deliberately challenge the stagnant leader in your space, or, if you happen to be the leader, to aggressively audit your own vulnerabilities and protect your market share before a hungry startup exploits them.
The most successful, enduring leaders are those who are fiercely willing to cannibalize their own legacy products before a scrappy startup does it for them. They have to be willing to destroy their own CD business to build the MP3 player.
And that brings me to a final, somewhat provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We've talked extensively about the innovator's dilemma, how massive public companies are paralyzed by their shareholders' demands for high margins. And we just discussed how modern startups are being forced to build massive, capital-intensive physical halo moats to survive the AI era. So let's combine those two realities.
I'm listening.
If massive capital is now the prerequisite to building physical moats, and public companies are trapped by their own margin expectations, what happens when a legacy giant decides to play a completely different, ruthless game?
What do you mean?
What if an incumbent creates a fully secret, legally separate assassin subsidiary? Imagine a shadow company funded with billions of dollars by the parent corporation, but completely shielded from Wall Street. They are given zero margin expectations. Their singular, absolute mandate is to build a disruptive, low-cost product designed entirely to bankrupt their own parent company's legacy flagship product before an outside startup can do it. Can a corporate giant successfully pretend to be a scrappy disruptor in the shadows? Or will their bureaucratic corporate DNA and their ultimate need for control always give them away? It's something to mull over as you watch the giants in your own industry try to navigate the future. Until next time.